back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Spooky Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jack the Ripper Son Keller.
And it is officially the month of spooks and scares. Last week was unofficially because we were still recording in September, so like, you know, there was some wiggle room, but we still made it a spooky episode. But we're fucking deep in the paint now. We are full on spooks, we're full on scares, which is why we're talking about a kids movie this week. Obviously, that's how that works.
I mean, to be fair, if this had been out when I was a kid, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it because it is so grotesque.
Yes, that is true. This movie, like, is genuinely unsettling even as an adult. This is a wildly unsettling movie, even though it is still only rated PG, which is kind of fucking wild. We're talking about Paranorman, Laika's third official movie, I believe. And if you are unfamiliar with it, it is a stop motion film from start to finish about a boy who sees dead people and talks to them, and hijinks ensue, I guess is the fucking short ass back of the box blurb. It gets a lot darker and deeper from there. I mean, boy sees ghosts, talks to ghosts is a fairly dark thing unto itself. But you know, it goes places. It goes some fucking places, I'll tell you what.
Yes.
It goes as far as to borrow a lot of horror iconography from adult horror films, such as Halloween. There's a lot of like Evil Dead vibes to it. Dawn of the Dead. You get a lot of horror references as well. I meant to watch Halloween 2 Season of the Witch because they strictly said Season of the Witch in this movie, and I was very curious to see like what the comparisons were, because I know that Halloween 2 is wildly different from Halloween 1 and that like Michael Myers isn't even in it. So I was very curious.
It's 3, by the way. There was a Halloween 2 that had Michael Myers, but otherwise you're right.
Halloween 3 Season of the Witch?
Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. I had to correct you before someone jumped up your asshole about it. Now I'm doubting myself.
It is Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Why did I think it was Halloween 2?
Because it's kind of weird. Like, you would think that if they were committed to the anthology bit, they would have just went to that right away. But they did do another one with Michael Myers, which is why people got mad.
Huh. All right. Well, I was wrong. So great. That's, you know what? An ill portend for this episode.
Listen, you said I was gonna let it go, but the last time I let something go, you told me not to. So.
No, I appreciate that you told me I was wrong. I just don't like. Listen, my recording timer is at 3 minutes and 20 seconds right now, and I have already said something horribly wrong. And you know what? That's going to be shorter for the listening audience because I'm going to edit out like the 10 seconds of silence of me typing. We're under 5 minutes and I have already fucked up.
Oh, Sean.
This is my third time watching Paranorman. I fucking love this movie. I absolutely adore it. I think it's creepy, it's weird, it's fun, it's funny. There's a lot of life in this movie. And plus, I think Laika does some of the most interesting visuals just in general. I think that horror is if you're going to look for a movie with interesting visuals, 9 times out of 10, I would say check out a horror film because they are the people doing just weird ass shit, and I can only respect them for it. Add on to the fact that it's entirely stop motion, and you have some of the weirdest fucking aesthetics in the world, and it just shines for it. I absolutely adore Paranorman with every fiber of my being.
Yeah, there's a real eye for detail, too. Like, nothing is ever skimped on. Like, it's so dense. There's so much going on in every single shot. Lots of little gags, little call-outs, little references, subtle and not so subtle. Yeah, I mean, visually, this is magnificent. This is a marvel. And overall, I agree. I think that the movie is great. I think that this is one of the cleverest, smartest kids movies out there. And overall, I really enjoyed my time with it. I think it's really like emotionally resonant. I do have one caveat, but it is like the biggest spoiler caveat that I would not wish to spoil in the world. But otherwise, I can go with a very easy recommendation on this one. This is a great Halloween time watch, especially if you're like, if you want something that's got that vibe, but you know, maybe you don't want to watch something super gory. Yeah.
Hard agree. I don't have the same issue that Jackson does with the spoiler caveat, which I think we're gonna talk a lot about. We spent like a good hour in our pre-discussion fleshing out our own arguments and debating the merits therein. I think we're gonna narrow it down to not take so long because I think that we have a better understanding of where we're both coming from. So just to let you know, that's what the spoiler discussion is going to be. But for now, we're keeping it light and positive and happy because it's a great movie. Honestly, it's a fucking wonderful movie with just a bunch of funny little weird adult gags that are so quick to miss, and they're wonderful. They're so good. I love this movie.
God, like I don't want to. I want to give a special shout out to a gag involving Norman's uncle, a bit of physical comedy. To spoil it would be bad, but it was the first time I think I genuinely laughed out loud in a movie in like months. Like,
there is a lot of very, very good physical comedy in this movie, and it just goes to show how good Leica is at stop motion and like how well they can manipulate their puppets, that they are doing physical comedy better than the physical space, hands down.
Yeah, no, I wonder if a big part of that is that it is like stop motion. They just have to like there is so much thought put into it. Yeah, I mean, either way, it's really, really impressive stuff. And like, I say that it's a good thing to watch if like you want that spooky vibe, but like art and decor. But definitely, like there are some moments that are pretty gnarly looking, like not gory necessarily, just like, oh, I'm gonna be sick.
Deeply unsettling, I think, is where this movie it straddles that line very well in that it gets into the unsettling category before kind of being like, well, haha, we're gonna write it off with a little bit of a jokey joke, don't you worry about it, and then you kind of reset, but like that lingering unsettlingness just kind of stays with you. If you've seen Evil Dead, specifically Evil Dead 2, I would say the cabin laughing scene is a very good comparison for the movie in that it is deeply unsettling, deeply uncomfortable, but also kind of funny at the same time.
Yeah, because usually like a lot of the grodier stuff tends to be like a punchline, like or like, you know, a really like dark joke, and it works really, really well. I mean, this movie pushes its PG rating, like not so much that I wouldn't recommend it for like a kid,
not a young kid though, not like this managed to skirt by at PG, under PG-13, but like barely. So if you are somehow listening to this and you have a child, first of all, hello, thank you for listening to this podcast. I don't know anyone who listens to this who has a kid that's under like 22. So second of all, if they're like 6 and you're like, oh, this is a PG movie, this will be great. It might not be great. It might be very bad, actually.
Yeah, I like, because I could see at that age, like my sister was kind of a weirdo, so I could see her getting a kick out of it, even at that young. But like, you know your kid, if they're a weenie like I was, this is
or
I
was just to clarify, I am not saying that I was an absolute weenie. I cried at Shaun of the Dead. All right.
See, Sean, you didn't have to offer that information, but the fact that you did, that's what makes you such a bro.
Listen, I am earnest to a fault is the problem here, and I am not ashamed to admit it. So yes, I cried at Shaun of the Dead. To give this specific point would be a spoiler, but let's just say someone dies in a rather horrific way, and I was very not about it.
So, you know, if you have a little Jackson, you have a little Sean, maybe wait until they're a little bit older. You know, maybe put on the Charlie Brown show for like, you know, the 30th time this October.
Or you can go with my other recommendation, which is Over the Garden Wall, a show that we talked about last year that has some very good Halloween vibes, but isn't quite as spooky. It's still kind of unsettling, but in a far more natural way. I think it doesn't feel as freaky. I guess this is our pre-discussion is going to be a little bit of talking about like what you would watch with a kid. I kind of like this. I do.
Because Over the Garden Wall, I think that's a good point, because Over the Garden Wall, it like has some like Courage the Cowardly Dog moments, but like overall the stuff about Over the Garden Wall that's kind of disturbing is the stuff that like a kid isn't really going to be thinking about, like thinking through the full like implications of whatever uncomfortable thing that's happening. It'll be like a weird like return the slab thing, and they can move on. Whereas this has the uncomfortable implications and like, you know, some dark themes, and it's a lot gnarlier.
And people just straight up die in this movie. Just die, and that's not super uncommon in kids media, but a little bit more uncommon is watching them die and then wrestling with the corpse.
Yes. Another thing that's pretty great that I love is how fucked up the zombies get. There are zombies in the movie, and there's no gore, but they still get like, you know, they get limbs taken off. You know, one of them gets that big old hole put in them. They get like
that is some honest to God horrifying shit. If they were not zombies, that would be an immediate R rating.
Yeah. but they are, so it's great. Like they're pretty gnarly zombies too. Like, again, there's no blood, but like their jaws like sloughing off. I mean, I've been playing Resident Evil 1, and the zombies in this look gnarlier than the zombies in that.
It's got some definite body horror to it as well. Like Paranorman actually, as I said, borrows from a lot of different horror genres that I think plays really well to fans of horror media. There's an extended joke about Halloween in it that I thought was one of the funniest fucking things I've ever seen. Just because it is such a goofy ass joke and I love it so much. But like it also just borrows in general from not just movies, but from like ideas and tropes of horror, and like how it makes people uncomfortable with like claustrophobia and walls and shapes that shouldn't be there and things moving and just general gross body horror. It does a lot to channel the adult horror but maintain that PG rating. We talk a lot about walking lines on this podcast, and Paranorman walks a tiny ass fucking line and does so with aplomb.
Yes, it does. I'd say it walks a lot of lines and overall does it really, really well. I think another thing that comes through while we're talking about like the horror references is that it actually helps with the emotional narrative, and that Norman's supposed to be kind of a like weirdo kid who is like if he couldn't see ghosts, he'd be hanging out at Hot Topic, you know, but he can, so he doesn't have any friends. So I think that like there's a genuine love to like, you know, Norman's like horror interests, like the macabre things that he appreciates, and that comes across in the writing as well, and that like the writers, the directors, they very clearly were this kid at one point.
Also, if we haven't sold you on this movie enough, there is one final selling point, and it is a big one. It's John fucking Goodman, who keeps showing up in movies that we're watching right now, and is a treat every time. Love John Goodman.
As soon as Prendergast talked, because, you know, I'd seen this before too. This was not my first time watching it. It's only my second. I haven't seen it since high school though. Around the time it came out. But like when I forgot that John Goodman was in this, and when I heard his voice come out of Prendergast, I was like hooting. I was like, yeah, let's go.
John Goodman is a podcast favorite, and we're not actively seeking out John Goodman films. We just keep stumbling into him in our quest to watch movies. And I could not be happier.
He's just such a good character actor. You could like find a way to put John Goodman in anything, and then sometimes he's like genuinely terrifying, like in 10 Cloverfield Lane. Like man's a national treasure.
10 Cloverfield Lane, of course, being the last Cloverfield movie, unfortunately ripped to that series.
Killed in the crib, gone too soon.
What? The Netflix one? No, I don't know what you're talking about. I guess that's the paradox.
Oh,
because it's the Cloverfield paradox. Like it's a movie that this is not a joke, and I should really cut it, but I don't think I'm going to.
Principled to the end. Just more sign that you're a true bro. Airing this for the world to see.
I mentioned that this is going to be a bad episode when I fucked up so poorly at the beginning, and like, here it is. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad.
You know what's not bad?
Well, it's not bad.
Paranorman, and you know what else?
That was a miserable segue.
Sean, we gotta get away from it. We gotta get away from it, Sean.
Keep going. No, keep going. You're right. What's not bad, Jackson?
It's Paranorman. It's hard because even in my praise zone, I don't want to switch to spoilers because I feel like that's the unofficial begin of our class trial about whether or not Paranorman's got one big stinky flaw. And so we're gonna ignore that. It's hard to like, because even with the like Prendergast physical comedy, like I'd love to talk about that in more detail, but like to relish, you gotta relish that when you see it, because I forgot that happened and it was really, really great when we got there. But I guess like while we are talking about themes, because although that will ultimately be the source of my contention, part of that is
shocker, just absolute shocker. Am I right, y'all?
Am I right, fellow gamers? Part of that is because like otherwise this movie is really, really smartly written, really, really forward thinking, in a lot of ways too. It's got a great grasp on like history and like, you know, societal movements. I mean, it was a little uncomfortable for me to watch because the townspeople in this movie were so shitty, and like I'm especially susceptible to this. I mentioned in the pre-discussion a little bit that like as a kid, like the series of unfortunate events books are supposed to be like black comedies, right? And I love those books, but like they were basically straight like dramas to my young mind. Like I spent those entire books like seething. Like I couldn't get a single laugh out of like, you know, the black comedy. Like I was seething at how terrible everyone in that world was, except for the main characters. And God, there are some real fucking clowns in Paranorman, and I know these people, and I hate these people. And the movie does a real great job of like exploring those dynamics of how these people come to be. Like it's really, really smart stuff, and that like as far as like the quality of the writing, I want this to be like extremely clear, no matter like how hard I may or may not go in the like spoiler discussion, or how hard that like I come across, even if I don't mean to.
Get ready for fucking serenity to your arguing. Get fucking ready.
That's why I want to say this here and now, that as far as like the quality of writing, Paranorman is in like the top like 1% of kids animated films. Like if the movie weren't so smart otherwise, like I don't even know if I would have put the thought, like the amount of thought it would have required to have the argument that we're eventually going to have into it. So in case like I get too negative later, I want to be on the record as saying that I highly recommend Paranorman, and indeed this isn't a case of like I recommend it for its visuals, but the writing's kind of wank. The writing is still really good, and it's a great movie, and everyone should watch it.
The writing is good just for the jokes and commentary within, even if you don't want to get into like the themes and ideas and stories, like the even just the joke writing, like the visual gags are worth it alone. There is a lot of really, really smart stuff in this movie, and I think it maintains throughout. And let's talk about why. Let's get into spoilers, shall we?
Let's get into spoilers. Let's just do it and be legends.
Before we do, though, as always, I have to say that if you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/BADHcast. Follow us on Twitter @BADH_cast. And next week, we're going to be doing something kind of weird this month in that we're kind of going from like a light fun movie to something that is dark, to a light fun movie to something that is really dark. So we're going from Paranorman, and then next week we're going to talk about Silence of the Lambs, a movie that I don't think either of us have seen.
No. I've heard it's real great. I've been wanting to watch it for a while, and it's one of those classics. Anthony Hopkins, Hannibal Lecter, iconic role. So I'm interested. I'm interested to see how this goes.
As am I. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. A far departure from Paranorman, to be sure. For now, though, we should probably talk about Paranorman, huh?
Well, before we begin this class trial and vote on who is the blackened, I would like to offer some praise, in particular, to Paranorman, and that a lot of its themes about, like, social justice and persecution, both on like a societal level with like the dumb fuck townspeople, and how like that legacy of like the Puritans doing something really, really shitty and their worldview impacting like the people today. Like that's way smarter than like any other kids movie. Add on to just like the sheer tragedy of the witch, the witch Agatha, what her backstory ends up being, and in addition to just the daily like blasé life that Norman leads, like you really feel for that poor little bastard. And I think the movie also does a good job of not getting too far into like, I guess I can't really think of a better way to put this. Not getting too far into like incel territory of like nobody understands me. Part of that is just like the fact that a lot of the problems that Norman has with like his family and bullying and being an outsider, like it's all really realistic, and he's generally just a sweet little kid. So I think that they managed to make a movie where you could very easily fall into kind of cringy, like angst, feel real, like have a lot of genuine pathos so that you really feel for the character. And that is not always an easy thing to do.
And before we get into it, I kind of want to set the stage myself a little bit, and kind of talk a little bit about, I think, where we established that we're both coming from with this movie, and to continue with that class discussion metaphor, our Danganronpa through line of every episode, because we cannot shake that series. We're going to talk a little bit about it. Don't worry if you don't understand Danganronpa. I promise we're not going to talk much about it. You'll get what we're going for immediately. This movie came out in 2012, in the smack dab middle of the Obama administration, a time of hope, if you will, and there is like 4 different meanings you can take for my hit on that word, because hope is a theme of everything. It's everywhere. It's all of it. It's all of it.
Poo, I say.
But also hope, the Obama campaign. You see, I'm playing off multiple things here.
My man did a clever, but it's a clever only the weebs will appreciate.
Yeah, I did a lot there. And then I explained it all, which completely undermined all of it, because I am just I need to make sure people understand that I am so smart. Hashtag I am so smart.
You're flexing on them. You're not explaining the joke. You're flexing on these groups.
Exactly. I have to do that every now and again to remind myself that I'm still alive, because otherwise, what's the point of living? But the point that I'm getting at here is that it came out in the middle of the Obama administration, and it's a movie that could very easily be read as one full of hope, one that, is trying to inspire children to be better and rise up and not become the bullies that, pushed them down and pushed them around. It's a very important, potent meaning for kids in general. Like, I feel like kids' movies should be movies of hope, because feeding our children movies filled with despair is not something you should do until you're in your 20s and you realize that the world has gone to shit, and everything is terrible. And oh wait, that's not what I'm trying to say here. No, kids should be hopeful, because hope is, what springs forward and continues to push everyone forward, and despair just drags everyone down. So the point that I'm making here in general is just that this movie could be read as very hopeful. Alternatively, you can kind of see some despair seeping through. And for that, I turn to Jackson, our resident despair expert.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? There's nothing colder or deader than my shriveled black heart. So, all right. Let me preface this by saying that I agree with Sean in that, like, as a kids movie, you probably don't want to have your kids movie end like No Country for Old Men. You probably don't want that.
Pro tip, it probably won't sell kids movies.
I recognize this. However,
That's a big but.
I do think that the movie's writing is so smart and the movie's emotional resonance is so strong that while I was watching it, I could not help but go down some roads.
Before you get into this, I do have a question for you.
Yes.
What level smart does a movie need to be for you to enjoy it? Does it need to be like just stupid enough, or like what is this happy medium that you look for in your movies? Because I feel like I cannot. When I recommend movies, I cannot strike the Jackson Keller the Jackson Keller bar, because it's either too smart and you don't like it, or too stupid and you don't like it.
Well,
What's that middle bar?
I mean, honestly, I wish I knew that myself. So let me explain what I mean in more detail. So the big sort of twist, and it's a very clever twist. Let me reiterate, is that, you know, Norman is tasked by the groundskeeper from Grabbed by the Ghoulies, his uncle, and he needs to go read a book at the town witch's grave that they're all based around. That's their, you know, Salem witch trial tourism, like small New England town, you know, what have you. He's got to go read a book at the grave or else bad shit's going to happen. Shocker, things go wrong. Puritan zombies, the boys, as we will henceforth call them. The boys rise from the ground and, you know, havoc starts going. And it seems like a pretty standard, if more gruesome, kids movie premise, right? Like, we're going to go on this wacky adventure to try and stop the boys, and the boys are coming after us, and we're going to get the town involved. Where the movie starts to be a little smarter than that is that the boys don't want to hurt Norman at all. They don't want to hurt anybody. And in fact, it is the very same ignorance and like patriarchal fear mongering that the Puritans established both in the film and in real life that lead to the puny brain, like Trump voter townspeople to turn and like chase after the zombies. And now the zombies are the ones that have to flee in terror, and they're desperately trying to like contact Norman, and he still thinks they're going after them.
Can I get an irony?
It's real great stuff. And also these Puritans are responsible for sentencing a little girl to death who could see ghosts just like Norman, because, you know, Salem witch trials, all that shit. So our villain isn't much of a villain, so to say. You know, that the big deals made about the witch's curse. I can't believe that like our episode about the darkest minds is one that I keep coming back to, but I keep coming back to it. So I talked about that episode of the darkest minds about what I call the Magneto problem, where you have a situation that is something of an allegory or coded around some social justice issue in real life, but the introduction of fantasy elements maybe muddies the water a little bit, and it's more subtle here. It's not like, because the problem, you know, specifically with Magneto, the problem is, you know, we the X-Men are fighting for our rights to not have like the government put trackers on us, and then the government says, lol, no, you can like rip apart planets with your magnetism, of course we're going to be keeping tabs on you. And so even though the movie or, you know, with the series or whatever is, you know, making this comparison between the mutants and like some oppressed group, usually it's pretty broad, most oppressed groups cannot, you know, bend the planet with their minds. So
I've seen the gays do some crazy shit, man. I've seen the gays do some crazy shit.
You know, truly, this is what dumb conservatives are talking about when they talk about the gay agenda.
They will warp the minds of the world. They have Cerebro.
Exactly. So with all that as our baseline, what is my problem then? Because again, it's a subtle one, and I want to stress that this isn't like, if I'm like broken inside, I've been broken for a long time, because I had this exact same reaction to the movie, and I sort of realized it while I was watching it, like, oh fuck, that's what this movie was about. That's right. I wasn't a big fan of this. This being this plot element, not this movie. The movie's great. But basically, Agatha, the witch of the town, her curse is not to unleash zombies upon the masses. Her curse is on the Puritans who killed her. And the curse is that as they exist in these horrible, like, degenerative, like, grotesque, zombified states, and every year they will rise and they will be like as frowned upon and disgusted and like brutally wronged as Agatha herself was in life. Now, that's great. It's all great stuff. It's great motivation. My problem is that it feels like in some ways with how the ending plays out between her and Norman, that we're doing the ultimate theme of like two wrongs don't make a right. But from what we see of Agatha's actual actions, morally, she is completely justified, in my opinion. And so while I think we were arguing about, or in my pre-discussion, I used the word that it like equivocates or like has a false equivalency between the zombies and Agatha. And I think Sean is right in saying that the movie at no point like ever tries to say Agatha's as bad as the boys who killed her, who murdered her. That's true. But I think that with this element of like, you know, we gotta stop Agatha from like lashing out and hurt when like the people that she's lashing out on are the people who murdered her. It feels, something about it don't feel right to me, especially when the ending. And again, I understand that like this is a kids movie. Can't have it end like Old Country for No Men, Old Country for No Men, No Country for Old Men.
You got there. It works. It's same thing. You know, it's just description, noun. You're fine. Who fucking cares?
But you can't have your movie end with Norman going off to like, you know, live like Prendergast and repeat the cycle or whatever. And I do think, for what it's worth, that Norman's character arc, because Norman does genuinely like paint people with a broad brush and assume that even people who like him, that think he is cool, are like out to get him, that he does open his heart to these people. I think that that's valid. But with Agatha, since she's kind of Norman's foil, it seems like in order for that comparison to ring a little more true to me, like Agatha would have to actually be inflicting some hurt on people who didn't deserve it. And the Puritans definitely deserved it. And that's basically it. Like, not quite a false equivalency, but like where I think the movie, in terms of like its dialogue and its staging towards the end, kind of gets into like two wrongs don't make a right, when one of the aggrieved is someone who is like a child who had the worst possible like trauma inflicted upon her and is taking it out on only her aggressors. And that's it. That's my qualm with the movie. That's my big sticking point.
I mean, I do think that there is some legitimacy to what you're saying, but I don't think it holds water within the narrative of the film, because I do think that like that's basically saying like, oh, you know, rioters who are fighting for equal rights and like not to be killed by the police are just as bad as the police who killed them. That's an absolutely, you know, false equivalency, not true. Property is not people, all that good stuff. I think that what your read on it is entirely fair. But I think that the point of the movie is less about like two wrongs don't make a right, as it is about like trauma and not letting yourself become the bully for the people who have wronged you. Because both of those things are very prevalent throughout the movie. I mean, the statement of it's survival of the thickest, as Neil puts it earlier, talking about if you were dumber and stronger, you would be the bully instead, is very much a good metaphor for oppressors in general, but B, something that is something that feels throughout the movie. Like, it's something that it wants to be constantly reminded of, like, anyone could be the bully if they had the power. The trick is to have that power and understand that you don't want to oppress. And so it's not so much saying that two wrongs don't make a right as it is saying that, hey, just because you have this power doesn't mean that you should do unto them what they did unto you, because then you just create a new cycle of oppression and not malfeasance, but, you know, bad things. Let's just say bad things. Let's stop pretending to be smart and say bad things. Because I mean, like, that's the core of feministic ideologies, especially like intersectional feminism, is to level the playing field, not to, you know, come back and be like, you bullied us, so now fuck you, we're bullying you type of things. And I mean, like, there are like reparations and whatnot, but that is, again, in the name of leveling the playing field. And so I do think that Agatha's, you know, two wrongs don't make a right is in essence what the film is saying, but not like oh, you are as bad as them, as much as it is like a don't stoop to their level, don't become them. Which is a far more relevant and important thing, because violence begets violence, any of the other themes and ideas that you could pull from it.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I think that to an extent, I am just too, like, withered and cynical, and that the movie is coming from a nice, wholesome place of forgiveness and anti-bullying and all that stuff. And I think overall a lot of the stuff the movie does really well. But I just want to reiterate that we are, like, what we're talking about is generally just my kind of my guttural reaction, like, to Agatha's plan was less like when Norman is bemoaning, like, oh, like, I can't do anything, I can't stop anything, like, things are only just going to continue. My reaction was like, yeah, man, let her do it, like, go get him, girl, like, fuck the Puritans. And I'm being a little facetious, but that was, again, if I had to say, like, talking less, like, high-mindedly about the like, themes sort of manifest, I think I had to say what my ultimate, like, genuine problem with the movie was. It was that the movie, through that lens of forgiveness, it felt like to me that a lot of the people, like, in the town, like, when we go back to Norman's side of the story, their sort of appeals to humanity, like, didn't really work so much for me. And I'll just give one concrete example, and we can, you know, table this and go to other discussions. Like, at the end, when Norman's sister stands up for him, which I think is good. Their relationship is, like, pretty typical, like, bratty, like, teenage sister, like, has a younger brother that she think is creepy and annoying. Like, that's all realistic and well done. I don't mind that she, like, sticks up for him. What I mind a little more is that, you know, in the, like, as our ragtag group of misfits sort of stands in solidarity with Norman, Alvin is there, who is a complete, like, piece of shit, who has, like, no humanity in the movie. We never get, like, if we're talking about bullying, I think that, like, it, like, having that moment where, like, Alvin shows, like, a bit more humanity to, like, Norman, like, maybe, like, he's kind of bullied at home, but I mean, he's mostly just a goober, and he's a pretty mean goober at that. So, like, when Alvin is among them, and this isn't the only instance, but again, I don't want to bang on about it too much. So when Alvin's kind of included in the, like, stand proud with Norman mode, I'm like, I don't know if I'm so hot on including, like, Alvin in this moment. This doesn't feel terribly earned. And I guess that would be, like, my one, and to reiterate, this is, like, my one criticism of the movie.
I do just want to say, I think that Alvin being there and not entirely earned is kind of Alvin in general. Like, it's shown that he kind of gloms on to things that he think could get him status. And so, like, him jumping on and being like, oh yeah, Norman's great, I've trusted him this whole time. We actually have a blog, and I know that's two separate parts of the movie, but I think it does a lot to underscore the point of Alvin just kind of gloms onto things that seems like they would make him, more likable in the eyes of the town, which is in and of itself its own foil to Norman's own traumas and whatnot. So I think that there's something to be said there just for Alvin's actions and how he responds to situations and stimuli.
Sure. I've said my piece. We can move on to like trauma theory and stuff. So
okay, well, trauma is also a thing that you could read into this movie fairly easily, and just kind of Agatha's journey through trauma and how we manifest trauma and how we handle it, because arguably, again, if you want to say that Agatha and Norman have a lot of similarities, which is an understatement of the century, Norman is dealing with trauma by withdrawing and immediately painting, as Jackson said, everyone with a wide brush and assuming that no one wants to deal with them because of a bad home life, a bad school life, just being bullied all the time. So he regresses into himself and just deals with his trauma that way, which isn't healthy on a personal level. Agatha, on the other hand, very much lashes out and blows her trauma outward and hurts people who don't deserve it, namely Norman, who is coming to try and help with her and talk with her. She zaps him with a lightning bolt and, puts a little bird mark on his shirt right over his heart, which I like. I don't necessarily have a thematic reading on that. I just think it's a neat touch. But I think this also kind of deals with the ways that we internalize and externalize trauma as a result, because a lot of what Norman is talking to Aggie about is like, hey, your feelings are absolutely valid. Everything that you're saying is entirely true, and I sympathize with you, but that does not make it okay for you to wreak the havoc that you are currently wreaking on the town. Like, externalizing trauma, especially in ways that hurt and impact others, is an incredibly negative thing to do. Like, that is not to say that your trauma isn't valid or you shouldn't deal with it or reconcile with it. See a therapist. Absolutely. Mental health is important, something that we bang on about every fucking episode. But, externalizing it in a way that hurts others is not how you deal with trauma, especially coming from someone like me who has dealt with a lot of anger issues his whole life, and like that is a way that I have externalized trauma previously. It's something that speaks to me of like, hey, you might not actively be trying to hurt people, or you might only actively be against a few people or a few issues, like something stupid or being hung as a child. Similar things, mad at a video game, getting hung as a kid, same deal. But externalizing it.
Listen, League of Legends, more traumatic than being hung, I think.
But externalizing it in that way is not healthy. And so I don't think that Norman is excusing her actions as much as just being like, listen, you got to reconcile with yourself and understand that they fucked up and they are absolutely paying for it with every fiber of their being in this moment. But like, this is not how you externalize trauma. You need to understand and accept it about yourself and grow from it. And I think that's something that the movie does a really interesting job of dealing with. I don't have specific examples beyond what I've already said, but I just like it. I think it's an interesting trauma metaphor.
No, and the actual scene between them, I really like. I really like their conversation. I really like the visuals of it. I love the visuals of like Agatha's like Super Saiyan rage form. Like, God, the animation's wonderful.
Oh my God, yes, all of that is so good. Fuck, I love that whole scene where the ground splits apart. It's so good, so fucking great.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid read on the movie. And I think that like, yeah, whatever personal misgivings I may have, like I want to be clear here that I don't think the movie the movie is sympathetic to Agatha, and the movie like has genuine empathy for like people like her who are oppressed and wronged. I think one thing I think that's really, really good about the movie is that like there's a lot of like, it's not just that there's a lot of queer coding, but it's I like, it's pretty impressive for a movie from 2012. Like, it's such a small thing, but for like to have a character who is openly, unambiguously gay. I mean, fuck, Disney can't even do that now.
It's such a goofy joke, but it has such like good far-reaching implications within the universe of the movie that is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, because it's not like a gay joke. It's not like, oh, laugh at him because he's gay. The joke is on Courtney for like for being so shallow, basically.
If you're unfamiliar, for what it's worth, if like you listen to us talk this far, A, go fucking watch Paranorman. What are you doing? But B, the football quarterback hunky dude that Courtney is lusting after this entire time, there's no like indication that he is gay up until the end, where she's like, oh, you want to go out? And he's like, yeah, my boyfriend loves chick flicks. And that's it. And it just kind of like sends shockwaves through the movie of like, oh, he was gay, but also a person? What? It's just really nice. It's surprisingly wholesome. Also, the fact that he's the high school quarterback is kind of great in its own little subversion of expectations that I really like. But yeah, no, it's great. Continue. Talk about queer coding.
That's an element of the movie. Like, that tends to be, even in examples where the movies are getting praised for their handling of queer coding, like that it's resonant or whatever, like that tends to be the criticism, is like, well, you can make a movie about like LGBT themes, but you're not willing to actually put in like an LGBT character. And now granted, like I could see why, like, you know, the himbo be, you know, Chad Himbo having a boyfriend might not seem like a lot, but I think that especially in the context of when this is made, that's still pretty cool that they went out of their way to include that representation, in addition to having the very obviously more relatable themes of like people fearing what they don't understand, and like small-minded town, and like feeling isolated. It's great. It was good. It was good. I liked it.
So just a small last little thing that I just want to talk about, just the idea that the villain is in fact Norman's dad. Hello, father-son relationships. Oh no. So this is
Hey, listen, I got nothing to say about this because Norman's not talking to his dad from beyond the grave, all right?
Oh. Boy,
got
man.
him. And the elm is me. And continue.
This podcast does love its father-son relationships, huh? So I think what's really interesting about this movie is that, in general, Agatha is presented as a very sympathetic, quote unquote, villain, in that she's not really a villain. She's a child lashing out at a essentially idea that she does not understand and cannot comprehend. And so her animosity is mostly just her own emotions and not understanding. The zombies are incredibly repentant in their own actions and are actually trying to set things right and, you know, fix the world from their horrible mistake. Everyone in this movie is basically like, we need to fix things. We need to make the world a better place. The only person who generally was like, fuck that, was Norman's dad, who was like, I don't believe Norman. Why would I believe Norman? I'm afraid of Norman. Norman sucks. He doesn't say Norman sucks, but
he doesn't have to.
Yeah, it's in the subtext, which actually really makes a really interesting idea, especially with the whole trauma thing. Like when you're painting everyone with a wide brush because your dad doesn't even believe you or seem to like you, it's a big deal. And so the idea that his dad is the villain, I think, is a case that could fairly easily be made just from those little snippets I gave you. Like, there's not really a true villain in this movie, but I think that the dad is the closest thing we have, just because how little he believes in anyone, honestly.
I spent the whole movie, God, just so like again with the series of unfortunate events thing, seething about how shitty his dad was to him. Like, oh my God, to the point where I again, kids movie. Sean's right. It's a kids movie. Movie can't end with Norman not forgiving his dad. But I wouldn't have forgiven Norman's dad if I was Norman, goddammit.
Which I think is an entirely fair statement to be made about the end of the movie, but also like the power of a father coming and being like, hey, I was wrong and I want to try and make things right is a big deal, especially to a kid.
Yeah, no, that's completely true.
Norman's dad is also, I mean, everyone in this movie has a really good character arc just in general. But in general, I think Norman's dad is the most antagonistic of them all. I want to just wrap up by making kind of a funny comparison, because we were talking, I watched this movie with Sam, and she made a comment about how it's very similar to Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, where like the zombies are misunderstood, and like the big difference, and this is just kind of a weird comment on Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, is that in this movie, the zombies are monsters in both life and death. But they recognize that about themselves and like apologize, and as I've said many times, are quite repentant of their monstrousness. The zombies on Scooby-Doo Zombie Island are of Confederate soldiers, and they never really reconcile with that.
I forgot that. Whoa!
Yeah, they're kind of like, oh no, they're great. They're just, soldiers of the South.
I remember them being pirates for some reason.
There's pirates in Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, but their Confederate soldiers are the spirits of the people, and it gets dark. There's some
Whoa. That shit's fucked.
Yeah. Sam was talking about she's like, oh yeah, it's like Zombie Island, right? And I'm like, well, yes, but I'm like, it kind of took me a minute. I'm like, something about that doesn't sit right. What is it? And then it kind of clicked. I'm like, it's the fact that this movie acknowledges that the zombies are the bad guys in all walks of life. And they're just like, yeah, no, they were Confederate soldiers and they died. Whoopsie doopsie. What are we going to do about that? Nothing. All right, cool. Cut it. Send it to print.
Oh my God. But I mean, with the Confederate soldiers thing, it's so easy too. It's so easy. Like, yeah, you're not gonna redeem like fucking Robert E. Lee, no matter how much like the South goes. But like with wars, this is the exact same shit we talked about with fucking Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Like a lot of people get like chewed up and spit out by the war machine and fight for shitty causes. It's so easy to do that with your characterization. You can't just have them be Confederate soldiers and not address it though.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Pro tip. Generally don't put Confederate soldiers in your kids' movie unless they're the bad guys. It's not that hard, y'all. I mean, listen, Paranorman managed to take puritanical witch hunters, also incredibly evil people, and make them sympathetic, but still dealt with the fact that they're pure fucking evil.
Yeah, it didn't just say. Like, what's so smart about the movie, like, is one final word of praise. It didn't just say, like, Puritan's bad, although you could have stopped there because Puritan's bad. But, like, the ways that, like, their ideas and culture, like, the profound, like waves they made throughout American history, like, the fact that they were so foundational to this country and how we still haven't reckoned with that and how it's still with us. Movie's perfectly aware of that. The whole town is a product of puritanical horseshit. Fuck them.
Final word on the movie, go watch it. Also, go watch other Leica films. Leica is probably one of my favorite film companies. They make great fucking movies. They're wonderful. Go watch them. Go watch Kubo and the Two Strings too. Great movie. 100% recommended. Fantastic. Jackson, I'm talking to you right now. I'm talking specifically to you.
Do you want to just do Kubo next month? I need an excuse to bust it out.
You know what? We might just do Kubo next month. Fuck it. You know what? Why not just make November like a month? Because there's 5 movies that I like. They have 5 other movies other than Paranorman. Let's just watch a bunch of Leica movies.
I'm potentially down with that. We'll talk about it more.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll make sure that there's nothing really coming up here. But I think a Leica month might be interesting because I haven't seen Coraline, which is wild because I love Leica. It's their big movie, and it's also Neil Gaiman, an author I really like. So gotta fix that at some point. I've been Sean McKinda. Find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. On the rare occasions I'm on there.
And I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me right here Thursdays at noon, baby, beating a dead horse, nowhere else.
If you want to get in contact with the podcast, at BADH_cast on Twitter. It's where we mostly post out updates and like, hey, we're watching this next week, and hey, our episode's late for whatever reason, or hey, there's a bonus episode. That's where you're going to find that. If you want to talk with Jackson and I in a little bit more of a personal setting, Patreon.com/BADHcast. Only $1 a month gets you access to our Discord. $5 a month gets you access to our Discord, as well as our backlog of bonus episodes. We just released an episode about Lars and the Real Girl, an absolutely weird, fantastic movie if you want to talk about movies that walk some fucking lines.
Yes.
And at $10 a month gets you everything I've said before, as well as the ability to request bonus episodes. So if you're like, hey, I want you guys to talk about fucking My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, the era of Discord. I don't know if that's a movie. I know that some of that stuff were words I said, but we'll watch it. It also gets a little something something.
Thank you so much, Julia, Travis, Pat, Mom, Aunt Summer. One of you please recommend the fantastic animated film My Little Pony Age of Ultron.
It was really weird that James Spader was in a My Little Pony movie. Oh boy. Also, thanks to Lars the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide, alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go check them out however you can. Stream their music, buy their music. I know they're doing some like outdoor shows. If you're around for that and feel comfortable, absolutely. In general, support artists right now. Musicians, theaters, all that good shit. They're in dire straits. Support them however you can. Also, thanks to 25yearslatersite.com. There's a little button of us in the corner, but you should definitely check out what all is going on over there. There's a bunch of really talented people doing a bunch of really talented writing. Next week, as I said, we're talking about The Silence of the Lambs, a very different movie from Paranorman.
Maybe we'll watch it with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. Hiss, 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 hiss.
I need you to swear that we will not make that reference next week, because it is the most played out thing anyone has ever done. And I knew you were going to do it, and I was cringing internally, like ahead of time. I hate that. I hate it. This might be my favorite movie next week. Like, I might watch and be like, this is it. I will watch this movie for the rest of my life. I am so happy. But I cannot with that reference.
We're just going to have to find out. Tune in next time.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go